I think it's fair to say that the performance of Lando Norris at the Dutch Grand Prix caught everyone off guard. Regardless of yet another early setback for the McLaren drivers, with race starts proving to be a real weak spot for Lando in particular, Norris was not only able to retake the lead, but do so in a scarily fast manner. Nobody was more taken aback than their direct rivals in the championships, as Red Bull and Max Verstappen were not only left in the dust on the track, but were left with one overwhelming feeling following the race: fear. Red Bull have experienced their fair share of bad weekends in recent rounds, from the popcorn-worthy radio fracas at Hungary to the complete inability to move forward at Monaco. However, despite all the shock and awe inflicted on the team, there is a bit of a rift in regards to how the team are digesting it, with Max Verstappen taking a clear stance that something needs to be done, but all Christian Horner could manage was yet more diffusing, refusal to take accountability, and this is how you could tell it was a really bad weekend for the team. Christian Horner's main focus seemed to be giving as many sarky and distracting quips as possible. Surely then, as Max looks to the team to pick up the pace, the next few races are going to prove all important for both his championship hopes, as well as repair the recent damage done to the relationship between the team and its main driver. Want to know why Christian Horner is at odds with the Verstappen camp again? It just seems like the tension continues to build, and it's really picking up the pace over the past couple of months, unlike the Red Bull car. And stick around, because according to one pundit, there could be more at play here. Max Verstappen's race at his home Grand Prix will be bittersweet for him, as while he did get a home podium and a chance to race in front of the Orange Army at home, unlike every other race at his home Grand Prix since its reintroduction, he was not at the top step. It was yet another tricky weekend for the Dutchman, who seemed to have lost a bit of belief in the car underneath him due to some limitations with its current design, which we will get onto in a moment. But for the time being, I think it's best we recall what he had to say following the race. "We just weren't fast enough, but that wasn't something I hadn't anticipated. The last few races were not really fantastic, so in a way that was already a bit alarming, but we know we don't have to panic. We know that we are just trying to improve the situation, and we are working on that. F1 is very complicated." The already alarming element of the car's malperformance, especially compared to their early season contender that Max spoke of, was only added to by the more pressing issue of Norris gapping him by over 20 seconds. While it was alarming in regards to the pace of the car, the fact that Max knew that the car was limited from FP1 and showed no signs of improvement since the first practice on Friday shows that not only is the car flawed, but it is also difficult to steer in the right direction across the course of a race weekend. When discussing the issues with the car, Max gave a very clear response as to what the issue with the car is, as well as encouraged haste in the team in addressing the issue. As he said, "The whole weekend has been the same. I had pretty much the same balance from FP1 all the way to the race. I mean, the limitations are the same. So yeah, it's just been very hard to solve at the moment. It just seems like we are too slow, but also quite bad on tire deg at the moment. So that's a bit weird because I think in the last few years, normally we've been quite good on that. So something has been going wrong lately with the car that we need to understand, and we need to, of course, quickly try to improve. It's just not a connected balance front to rear." And while Max took a measured approach, claiming that the current Red Bull is not the easiest he's ever driven, his father and longtime Christian Horner admirer, Jos Verstappen, was far less measured in his response, sending Red Bull a seething message in his interview with De Telegraaf. It must be pretty perplexing from the Verstappen camp's perspective, however, according to Jos, the writing is on the wall, and both he and his son are not going to take the team's malperformance lying down. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'm doing it anyway. The fact that you have to go back to the car from the beginning of this year says enough. They just don't have it right here at the moment. I think they should take a good look in the mirror. Max knew this was coming. He just didn't have a chance. This way, it's going to be really tough the rest of the year. Max is doing everything he can, but he doesn't have the material to finish it. It was already exceptional that he qualified second. And while yes, second and sixth isn't exactly the worst result in the world, McLaren have made the prospect of the rest of the season pretty tough for the Milton Keynes team, and if McLaren are going to continue to fight at the front and Red Bull are going to be rendered toothless to them, then P2 finishes won't only be the best result possible to them, but increasingly hard to come by. Oscar Piastri had a comparatively tough weekend, and if Norris's pace is anything to go by, then he won't be the only McLaren finishing at the front in the races to come. If Red Bull want to stand any chance of finishing finishing at the top of both championships because a McLaren threat exists in both whether they want to admit it or not, then they have to heed the warnings of the Verstappen camp. So, how have the team taken it? Well, while Helmut Marko gave a similar reaction to Max Verstappen, claiming that the team had a lot to think about while addressing the same issues that needed fixing, Horner reacted in an entirely different way. While in some interviews he did say that Max did his best to maximize the car and achieving P2 was the best that they could hope for and that there is work to do, in others he decided the best way to win over fans, critics and to patch up the divide in the team was to give smarmy quips, insisting that they'll just get back on top of it in the future and that this is just a blip in form. As the team principal said, "It just shows that things have moved very quickly. We were winning races by 20-25 seconds and Stefano Domenicali was asking us to slow down in the first 5 races. And then it can change very quickly, and that means it can change back the other way as well." Not only that, but rather than dedicating interview time to the aforementioned criticisms of the team, he decided his time was best spent deflecting criticism to Mercedes, and while yes, Red Bull's nemesis did have a pretty poor weekend at Zandvoort, the fact that Horner chose the post-race interviews to air out Toto Wolff and his pursuits of Max Verstappen showed yet more deflection and arrogance from the Red Bull team principal, which has become all too familiar. The whole weekend for Red Bull served as a continued descent and a potential reigniting of the early season Verstappen and Horner flashpoint that started all the rumors that Horner continues to rebuff and bafflingly bring more attention to by simply having to have the last word and be seen to look like the big man. According to Martin Brundle, the messages sent by the Verstappen camp wasn't limited to Jos, and he believes that Max sent an unignorable message himself where it counts. The ex-F1 driver turned pundit saw Max's lack of pace as semi-self-imposed, maximizing the gap to the leading Norris in order to send a message to the Red Bull team to pick up the pace one way or another. Alluding to a form of on-track protest, Martin Brundle's theory went like this: "I would hazard a guess that that was not as fast as Max could go. He knew that he couldn't beat Lando, and dropping back a bit like that, it's going to give the factory a hurry up, isn't it? I'd be pretty sure of that." So fast enough to cruise, slow enough to lose out on the win is the idea according to Brundle, and while Max is used to controlling his pace, it would be a pretty risky game to play. Though then again, Charles Leclerc and Oscar Piastri were far enough away to be of no concern, and Max may have seen pushing for pushing's sake as more of a gamble, given the stress on his tyres already being of massive concern around the banks of Zandvoort. The worst part for Max is that the second half of the season throws up more and more of the tracks that will prove difficult on the tyres, as well as the dreaded curbs that have plagued the RB20 from the very start of the season. If Max really is sending a message, then Red Bull need to act quickly, as while 2025 is pretty much signed, sealed and delivered, the new regulations in 2026 may prove to be more of a pressing concern for Max, who up until recently had a good car to balance out the worries provided by Red Bull's early years as an OEM provider.